Now, for the man of the hour, the person you and I have been waiting for, Dr. Robert Herbal. Now, before Bob comes up, I want to give you a little bit of his bio. Bob is a double graduate of Case Western Reserve University. He holds a master's degree in mathematics and a doctorate in computer science. Under his leadership, Microsoft experienced a 7-fold increase in profits, the company's greatest period of growth in its history. He is now the managing director of the Herbold Group, a consulting business organization focused on executive training and profitability. He has authored a number of books, including What's Holding You Back, 10 Bold Steps That Define Gutsy Leaders, that many of you had the opportunity to read a chapter of prior to this event. Bob was not only granted us the gift of his time and knowledge this evening. Recently, he decided to commit $2.6 million to endow a second Herbold professorship, this one in the School of Engineering, the Herbold Professorship of Informatics and Analytics. So Bob, thank you as well for that. Many of you have also recently seen that a few weeks ago we announced a new undergraduate degree program that we will be initiating this fall. This is an undergraduate program in big science, data analytics, and this professorship is central to our efforts in creating that new undergraduate degree program. So Dr. Herbold is a courageous and generous leader, so please join me in welcoming Dr. Bob Herbold to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this is a great group. It's always fun to talk to a bunch of younger folks, and it's my my understanding. I'm not referring to you. I was told that like 60-70% of this audience may not have been born prior to some of the examples that I'm going to go through, so it really tells a story. I also have to comment on the exhibits out there, but I don't know how many of you saw the small tractor that was a robotic snow remover, and it had a big plow in front of it. Who was the individual back there, is he here in the room, that was explaining that? Anyway, that was sensational. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk about 3 examples that are real-world examples that you'll recognize the companies. And with each of these examples, hopefully, there is a lesson that you can take away and hopefully use over the years, because some of these stories are very, very robust. The first one that I want to talk about is RIM, Research in Motion. The product is the Blackberry. Now, be honest, how many of you at some point in your life, raise your hand if you were the owner of a Blackberry? Huge. Actually, given some of the younger folks here in the audience, it's not quite as large. It's probably 50-60% of the audience. So now here's the second question. How many of you own a Blackberry today? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 or 6 of them that are hanging in there. So let's talk a little bit about this company. It started in 1996. 2 guys in Canada were the founders. They are the originators of the company. In 1998, they actually introduced a PDA. It was their first Blackberry. It was a PDA, which had a bad reputation because that reputation of PDAs was somewhat soiled by the folks at Apple, but we won't get into that. But then in 1999, the company went public at $10 a share. By 2002, they were ready to introduce what we all know as the Blackberry, which was a full email machine, also the ability to go to the internet. Now, from 2002 until 2007, there was no bigger success story than the Blackberry. It went from about 2 million users in 2002 up to about 14 million in that period of time. The stock price went from $10 at the IPO up to $122 a share. This company was absolutely on fire. But here's the lesson. Also during that period of 2002 until 2007, things like touchscreens were beginning to appear here and there, okay? Very handy to pick out exactly what you wanted to do. Secondly, all the consumer feedback of Blackberry owners, and I was one at some juncture, the internet connectivity and the interface to the internet was pathetic, okay? Always has been pathetic compared to the smartphones that we own today. But basically, during that period, these two co-CEOs ignored all the consumer feedback. They were king of the hill. They were selling these things right and left. It was, you know, you went to a business meeting in 2007. It was a badge of modernity to own a Blackberry. I mean, it was almost, you know, you were ostracized if you didn't have one. So, huge success. So what else happened in 2007? Apple introduced the iPhone, okay? And second, a thing called the OHA was formed. It stands for Open Handset Alliance. And what it is some hardware manufacturers like Samsung, HTC, and others, and Google with the Android operating system, basically forming a group that would launch smartphones using the Android operating system. So, two key events in 2007. Now, what happened? Between 2007 and 2012, the market for smartphones just absolutely exploded. They became extremely popular. Samsung Galaxy was a smash hit. The iPhone was a smash hit, as were several other phones. But the thing that's so amazing is those two co-CEOs during that period basically did nothing except watch. Because the whole market was increasing, for a while there, even though their market share was dropping, they were growing slightly. But that didn't last long, and pretty soon they were in a severe tailspin. But at last, in January of 2012, the board of directors fired the two CEOs. They probably should have done it way before, but that's the way the world goes. So what happened then? They hired an insider. Everybody was disappointed because how's this insider going to fix this thing? And secondly, about 2 weeks into the job, the insider, in a communication to all the employees, said, I want you to know that no major changes are going to be put in place in RIM, in Research in Motion, the company that owned the Blackberry. Why in the world you would say something like that? So, complete chaos set in terms of the stock price. It panicked down to the 5-6 range for a period of time. Finally, in January of 2014, very recently, they had to fire that fella, and they've hired another individual who they think will be able to bring the company out of this tailspin. I have no hope whatsoever. They've tried to sell the company several times during that last 2-year period. They have no takers, so it's a sad story. But now let's step back. What did we just talk about? We talked about a very successful company. When should they have been taking some action? They should have been taking that action in 2002 and 2007, okay? They should have seen some of these early ideas and jumped on them and tried them. Everybody knew that the screen on that Blackberry was too small. They loved the keyboard, but the screen's too small. And secondly, the internet capabilities were bad. So what do you learn from this? Very simply, at every juncture, whatever organization you're in, whatever level you're at, ask the question, what really is going on? You face reality, and then develop a plan for dealing with it. It's so important at every juncture, no matter how successful you are, to step back and say, okay, what's going on? Let's not just rest on our laurels here. Look around, face reality, jump on the fresh new ideas, see what they're going to mean to you. So it's a very important lesson, and companies learn it the hard way over and over again. So it's a sad tale, but one that we can really learn from. These guys blew it big time. Some will say they were there in the job way too long. That's probably true. But the thing they're really guilty of is not being adequately paranoid and constantly facing reality and saying, okay, now what? We're having a good time, but guess what? We know competition will be right around the corner. Okay, let's talk a second bunch of companies, in this case, two companies. Blockbuster and Netflix. No, it's an interesting story. He says, don't bother. This is a rich story, okay? Kind of crisp feedback from this guy. You want to get up here and pick out the examples? Blockbuster. So it's 1985, before many of you have been born, and they started this business of having retail outlets where you could go in and rent a VHS tape. Some of you may not know what that is, okay? But you put it in your VHS player, and you can watch a movie. And you better get the thing back to the store in 3 days, otherwise you're going to pay a fine, okay? So the disc company was hot from the period of 1985 until, let's talk about 1997. By that time, some interesting things were happening. First of all, they had 4,000 stores at that juncture. That's how big Blockbuster had become. It was a raging success. The second thing that happened in 1997 is this strange guy by the name of Reed Hastings, who was a really strange guy, started this company called Netflix. And the trick is to basically go online, order a DVD, order a movie that will come on a DVD, have it mailed to you, watch the movie, and then mail it back. That was the deal. And so much per rental. What he was jumping on is the fact that at that juncture, DVD players were growing, but they only represented about 12 to 15% of households. So this is a guy that jumped in real early and bet on the fact that that's probably going to grow. Well, it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize it was going to grow. It was so much more efficient way to compact the digits that create that contain the movie. In 1999, he changed the business model, and he went to what is commonly referred to all you can eat model, so that basically you pay X dollars per month, and you can order as many DVDs as you want, and then send them back. Once again, it's still operating by mail in terms of sending and then sending back the DVDs. In the year 2000, this very strange guy, Reed Hastings, who was the Netflix guy, he decides that he's working too hard and he wants to cash out, okay? So he goes to Blockbuster and offers Blockbuster, the company, Netflix, for $50 million. He wants basically to go, to Malibu Beach or wherever and hang it up for the rest of his life. So believe it or not, Blockbuster says, no, we're not interested. Can you believe it? Their attitude is, real men have stores, okay? And anyway, so that's the story. In 2000, he turns it down. Crank the clock forward, 2004, what's happening? They're up to 9,000 stores. They continue. In the face of DVD players continuing to grow, they now have 9,000 stores. Now, at these stores, now you can rent either an old VHS tape or you can rent a DVD. So they're getting flexible, okay? And at the same time, Netflix in 2004 was registering revenue of about $500 million, okay? So this company's really growing now. Penetration of DVD players by 2004 was now in the 50-60% range. So this was a real business. So now what happens in 2007? Very interesting. Netflix, the weirdo Reed Hastings, he decides at a very early stage when the internet was alive and well but not that robust, that he would start a streaming service so that you no longer even needed a DVD. You could stream this thing. Of course, at that time, the internet connectivity wasn't what it was today, and in some cases, people were a bit disappointed. But the important thing is this guy had the nerve to jump in so early with an alternative that clearly could completely wipe out his existing business. There's an important lesson there. If you don't do it, your competitor will, so I better do it, was his attitude. So he jumps into the streaming business, keeps his fingers crossed, okay? Now, if you crank the clock forward to 2010, what's happening? Well, Blockbuster just claimed bankruptcy, all right? Netflix just announced that they crossed the 17 million user threshold, okay? And the rest, as they say, is history. Netflix has today, in 2013, the stock tripled, was about the hottest stock on the Wall Street markets, and Blockbuster is nowhere to be seen. So you step back and say, well, what do you learn from this? People who are successful have the attitude of, wow, I am really good, and they stick with it, all right? But secondly, in the case of whatever business you're running, you need to look for what I call inflection points. What's an inflection point? It's where the technology's changing or consumer habits are changing. In essence, it's going to have a big impact on you, and you better start thinking about the alternatives right now. Blockbuster did a terrible job of that. They just opened stores blindly until they went bankrupt. Reed Hastings at Netflix got in very early with DVDs, got in super early with streaming, and in both cases took a huge risk, especially the streaming risk. It's worked out well, but he had no idea. He knew he was doing himself in, but he had no idea what the eventual picture would look like. So beware of inflection points. No matter what your business is, no matter what level you are, look at your responsibilities and ask the question, hey, I need to do the things that I'm responsible for today. I need to do them well. But secondly, I need to look around at every juncture and say, how can I get run over? What could happen that could run me over? What are the inflection points? So first lesson, face reality and develop a plan. And the second is watch out for inflection points. Be on the guard. Okay, now let's talk the third example, which is Apple. We could tell many stories about Apple. Secondly, I will disclose that I'm from Microsoft, okay? So you might sense a slight tinge of bias, okay? So in '97, we made a deal. He got some cash. We signed a cross-license patent agreement, and we agreed to rev the Microsoft Office that ran on the Mac so that Wall Street knew that we thought he was going to actually make it. And what does he do? He forms this small team. This is now in 1999. He tried to resurrect the Macintosh with this Next operating system that he brought from the company that they just bought. It basically was a very slow deal. And they were puddling along. And in 1999, he did something really interesting. He looked at 3 inflection points. Number 1, hard drive capacity was going through the roof. You could store an enormous amount of data on these hard drives. Secondly, digital music was becoming the rage, okay? Where you could actually digitize music and send it around. And thirdly, internet connectivity was getting very robust, okay? So what happened? A company called Napster emerged. Some of you may have been customers of Napster. And what's Napster? It's a service where I could send Jeff all my music, and Jeff could send me all his music, and no cost whatsoever. The musicians didn't like this, okay? Nor did the lawyers. And but he looked at those trends and said, you know, there's something here. So what does he do? He forms a small group of people, 6 people. He wants to develop a handheld device that's around portable music. He goes out and he hires a very talented guy who had worked on PDAs at several different companies, you know, handheld devices. He hires him. His name is Tony Fidel. Hires him to be in charge of this 6-person group. He goes to the UK and hires the guy who had just won several awards for designing household appliances. You say, what's that all about? He wanted a device that was absolutely gorgeous, that when you pick it up, it's sensual, it's beautiful, it's all one piece. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So Jonathan Ive was the guy's name, and then he had one marketing guy that he reached for. So this 6-person team was totally self-sufficient. The secret, though, was highly, highly talented people. The second thing that he did was he kept the group tightly focused. He wanted innovation, but he kept them tightly focused on portable music. And you get a bunch of innovators together, one of the things that happens all the time is they do too much innovating, okay? You get creative ideas galore, and sometimes you lose focus of what you're trying to do in the beginning. So it's good to have that kind of specific goal. The third thing he did was he kept the 6-person team totally secret within Apple. He was asked later, you know, why do you keep it secret? And he said, listen, if people knew about that on campus, all the marketing people within Apple would want to help. They would want to be involved in this cool project. And pretty soon, you'd have meetings galore, you'd have emails galore, and nothing would get done. His attitude was, I have a marketing person. I'm counting on them. They're good. I know they're good. They're the marketing person. That's why I don't want them talking to anybody, and I don't want anybody talking to them. So it's a very interesting concept. He was the decision maker, hardcore, as you would imagine. And so what happened? In 2001, they launched the iPod, you know, the music device. It was an immediate rage, immediately climbed to a 75-80% market share of the portable music business, basically drove the Sony Walkman out of business for all practical purposes, and became the gold standard in terms of music. Now, that story has, I think, 2 powerful lessons. One is staff for success, okay? Pick really talented, good people at every juncture. As you graduate, get out in the working world or wherever you're going, and begin to gain more and more responsibility, you're going to realize how dependent you are on totally high caliber quality thinkers and doers. And so setting those standards very high is very important. So staff for success. The second thing is beware of consensus decision making, okay? When you're trying to innovate, the last thing you want is a team, all right? You want a leader. Now, if you're trying to improve a process, you really do need consensus thinking because you've got points of view in that audience, so to speak, that you need to draw from. And don't get me wrong, when you're trying to innovate, you need to listen to others and you need to seek out the input, but somebody has to be the decision maker. Otherwise, things go too slow, they get watered down. If you put a piece of innovation out on a table and ask for consensus agreement as to what we should go with. What happens is they all have different thoughts. They start whacking away at all the sharp edges. What's really causes success in the marketplace, both from a marketing standpoint as well as a product standpoint, are sharp edges, unique features that people like or dislike, but in fact, they're unique. What committees and groups do is they chop away all those sharp edges and they make it totally acceptable to the whole group and also totally boring, okay? And so beware of consensus decision making. Use it when it's appropriate. And there's a time for teams and there's a time for consensus management, but there's also a time, particularly when you're trying to innovate, that you need to beware. So 2 lessons there: staff for success and also beware of consensus decision making. With that, I'm out of examples for the evening, and plus I've probably used up my time, but hopefully are we about on schedule so we can do some Q&A? Good. Great.
So there's microphones underneath each of the screens, and we have runners around to ask questions. I'm going to take the prerogative on the first one, but maybe some students could start lining up at the microphones out in the room. So Bob, you talked about sort of the challenge of consensus building and the importance of leadership. Can you put that in the context of perhaps some of the lessons you learned during your studies at Case, or even some of your experiences at Procter & Gamble that you didn't have a chance to speak about?
I think that, you know, when I was at Case, the thing that struck me most was especially when I got into the area of working on a PhD, the realization that I am totally accountable for this, okay? Now it's on my shoulders, and to me that was a great experience, and it really confirmed what I knew all along, which is I like to get things done, okay? And so I ended up going to industry. I went to Procter & Gamble. You might say, why'd you go to Procter & Gamble? You're a technology guy. Well, I was doing all kinds of simulating of chemical reactions with my PhD thesis, solving them numerically on the gigantic computers in the Jennings Computing Center, which is a relic of the past, I'm sure. But anyway, that's what I was doing at Procter & Gamble for the first few years. In each case, you know, the thing that is important to realize, and you want to have responsibilities, you want to be held accountable, because that's what creates fulfillment in most people. So I think that the thing that is so important as you gain responsibilities and you have people working for you or you're working for someone, getting clarity as to what is expected of a person is very, very important. So no matter what job you're in, make sure you understand what the job is and what the expectations are. And secondly, when you have people reporting to you, make sure you're making it clear exactly what you want them to accomplish. You know, you can tell when an organization is overstaffed when a boss gets real fuzzy on that and starts talking about, yeah, you have to keep so-and-so informed and you have to involve them in this and that. You know the organization is overstaffed. So personal responsibility and accountability are fun and lead to very productive things. And I sensed that in my last several years at Case, and it certainly has been something that industry is built on, actually. So with that, we'll see if the students are coming up with any questions. Do we have any out there?
Just a quick question, you know, speaking from someone who is kind of just starting in a career, and maybe on behalf of a lot of students who are about to get started sort of in entry-level positions, what advice would you give, or, you know, what can you speak about as far as, you know, getting yourself into a position of leadership and, you know, getting to a point where you are making, you know, some of the calls that you were talking about as far as staffing or, you know, just general leadership?
The first thing is, don't worry about that. okay? The last thing you want to be seen, and I've seen students come in saying, my job here is to become a vice president. Now, tell me, how am I going to do that? Let me tell you, that is the biggest turnoff to someone hearing a youngster say that, youngster. But you get the idea. But here's the advice. I think that what's so important is to do something you're enjoying and that you have fun, okay? Because when you're having fun, let me tell you, it shows, all right? The enthusiasm level is there, the vibrancy is there, and you're having a much better time of it, and you're going to be more productive because of that. I think the second thing to do is to be sensitive to the fact that, are you going to enjoy this industry? Is it the kind of industry that will be fun for you? And think about those things. But I think the number one criteria is fun, and then secondly, do well. Make it clear, understand from the boss, what's expected. And also talk with the boss regularly in terms of bright ideas that you might have to improve the place. We were talking at lunch today. You want to get a good performance appraisal? Easy. Number one, find out specifically what the boss is after. And you can argue, but nail that down and do that really well. And then secondly, start looking around for those points of inflection or those, certain things that you can improve the place. And make suggestions and push at them and ask why not. And you'll learn from that. But you do it in a cordial way, in a way that is not confrontive. So have fun and start pushing, and enjoy what it is that you're doing.
So Bob, on behalf of the Case School of Engineering, we have just a small token of our appreciation. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will tell you that a Case alum is one of the founders of this company. So,
great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Right.